I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today with me I have the Volkswagen Amarok. And before you go down into the comments and say something mean like this guy has no idea about utes, just look at his genes. Turns out I actually am very interested in the dual cab segment. Driven virtually everything in it now, but I keep coming back to the Amarok V6 because I reckon there's just something special about this ute. Actually recently did about 3,000 Ks in Europe with one. That was fascinating, but they do work really well here in the Australian market. And we've got it back today because it turns out there's some pretty big news in Amarok world. The V6 model finally has the base grade that was promised to us more than 2 years ago. So you can now get an Amarok V6 for under 50 grand drive away in Australia, which is pretty good. And just because it's low end doesn't mean that Volkswagen will let you forget that it has a 6-cylinder engine. There are actually 7 different V6 badges, so nobody is going to miss it. The first one up here on the grille, which still gets plenty of the chrome treatment, because at the end of the day, it's not exactly a cheap vehicle, is it? But it is all about what's under that bonnet, a 165 kilowatt, 550 Newton meter, single turbo, 3 litre V6 diesel. The only picking this as a base model is the smaller wheels, chunky sidewalls, blacked out mirrors, and black grab handles that are quite different from the heavy chrome treatment you get higher up in the range. But whatever way you look at it, this is still a pretty complete utility vehicle, and that's especially the case when you have a look inside. Now, that's quiet you. It's doing a lot of beeping for whatever reason, but once you jump into the front cabin of the VW Ute, I reckon it still presents pretty cleanly and pretty well for what is now a fairly old product in this market. The Amarok was facelifted a few years ago. It has a new interior that has kept on keeping on since then. I like it. But what's interesting is that you hop in here and a lot of stuff is from the Volkswagen passenger car lineup. So if this is your first ute, you'll be right at home. Same steering wheel as like a Golf, very similar head unit, same gauges ahead of you, same shifter. It's all very familiar. And even though this is the lowest end V6, you've got a leather steering wheel, leather shifter, that's quite premium. But the rest of the materials are, let's say, hardy. Lots of plastic, easy to clean and durable. That's what you want for a car like this. Now, the seats in the core are very basic. They actually remind me of what's in my old Golf from 2011. They're not that supportive or comfortable, but hey, they get the job done. And if you want better, you can spend more money. In the Amarok V6 Ultimate, for example, you get 14-way Nappa leather pews out of the Passat. So it's really up to you, isn't it? But in terms of practicality, the interior is good. There's a big tray up here, one down here ahead of the shifter, 2 smallish cup holders between the seats, and an additional tray there. Now, because the Amarok is getting on in years, there's no wireless charging or anything like that. But what I don't like to see is if you go for this low-end core, Volkswagen nickel dime you out of 2 12-volt sockets up front here, something that you'll probably actually want in a ute. Another reason you might have to consider a rival is the Amarok's back seat space, which is pretty limited. There's a clue to that in how tiny these rear doors are. And when you jump in, you'll see that space is definitely at a premium. Headroom for me at 6 foot is no problem, but I'm right up against my own driver's seat, and I reckon I actually sit pretty close to the wheel. So if you're the kind of driver that likes to sit really far slung back, then you won't be able to transport many people here in the second row. Other utes, they have more space in the back as a rule. You also don't get air vents here. Now I know this is a ute, it's not meant to be a luxury car, but I reckon breathing isn't exactly a luxury. Thankfully the ones in the front are nice and high set so the air flows through. A surprise though is that you actually do get carpeted door bins in the Amarok, even at the core level, which means that water bottles and other paraphernalia down there won't slide around. What about the tray? Well, VW have thought about things sliding around there too, because even at the 50 grand level, the tray is lined. You don't get an exposed tray where the metal's open to the air. Everything's going to roll around and make horrible noises. So that's a nice feature. What you don't get around the back of the core or the Sport line, which sits above this one in the range, is you don't get lots of cool chrome at the back. There's no sports bar or anything like that. It's just a completely plain open tray. You will have to pay more if you want a tonneau cover or if you want the vehicle to look a bit cool around the back. What you do get is plenty of lashing points in the tray. The Amarok still has the widest tray in the segment too. You can fit a standard pallet back there. So if that matters to your business, then this ute will deliver. So what's the Volkswagen Amarok like to drive? Well, in many ways, this is still the king of the dual cab market in Australia, if what you're looking for is a ute that is brilliant to drive on road and really very good across a wide range of disciplines. Sure, it's not going to be able to bomb down a properly rutted trail like a Ford Ranger Raptor. It might not quite have the same presence as the new Mercedes X-Class, but it basically covers the field better than anything else out there on the market. We chose to do the majority of this video off-road because the Amarok doesn't shy away from that, even though in automatic form it is basically permanent all-wheel drive. It doesn't have low range, nor does it need it. We've taken several Amarok V6s off-road over the course of the last few years, and that first gear is so short, there's so much torque, and the 4Motion system is just tuned so brilliantly that it barely needs the rear diff locker switched on, let alone low range. But of course, on-road really is the focus for something with such a big engine, and the Amarok still stands out for its 3-litre turbo diesel V6. It produces 165 kilowatts of power and 550 newton meters of torque. In this application, the top-end Amarok V6 Ultimate actually makes 190 kilowatts and 580 newton meters, so this is a pretty strong engine no matter which tune you go for. It feels genuinely fast when unladen. Even when you have plenty of luggage and stuff in the tray, it's still a mighty quick ute. It just absolutely leaves behind any ute with a 4-cylinder turbo diesel, both in terms of refinement and pace. It's also pretty good economically as well. We've managed about 9 litres per 100 kilometres over a range of disciplines. It does increase considerably when you're off-road. I mean, that's no surprise to anybody, but on-road, this is a pretty frugal ute, despite having such a big engine up front. Another highlight of the Amarok on-road is its handling. The steering, it's still ute-ish, but it feels a heck of a lot more connected to the front wheels than in many of this vehicle's rivals. The chassis is also decent, grip levels are good, both mechanical and chemical, and you just don't feel like it's going to push you off the road at any point. It's safe and easy to drive, especially if you're coming from driving mostly passenger cars in the past. There's a dedicated off-road mode that combines all the features you basically need for moderate off-roading. So it has hill descent control that operates automatically, keeps it in a lower gear, makes the throttle more doughy and less jumpy. It works pretty well. It's a very foolproof vehicle to take on, as I say, moderate trails. Now the tyres on this core are just mid-range Bridgestone Jeweler highway terrains, so you'd think of upgrading those if you were going to go off-road with frequency. Whether off-road or on, the ride quality in the Amarok is pretty good. There's never going to be any escaping the fact that this is a frame vehicle with a tray out the back, and there's always going to be judders no matter how refined anyone manages to make a vehicle of this type. But the Amarok is up there with the best, especially once you have a bit of pace on. It's pretty calm and smooth to drive. No one's going to be feeling that uncomfortable. That said, the seats in the core, not my favorite. I definitely think about upgrading to the Sportline or the Highline at least to get the benefit of a more supportive seat to do long distances in. Another area where the Amarok is starting to show its age though is safety. Not only does it not have rear airbags at all, which remains a considerable problem if you're going to put kids into this thing, it doesn't have any adaptive safety. It doesn't have AEB, forward collision warning, adaptive cruise, lane keep, and those are technologies that are starting to filter out on rival utes, especially the Mercedes X-Class, which I see as this vehicle's major rival. So those are my impressions of the Volkswagen Amarok, a ute that's still holding up pretty well in 2019, despite the fact that rivals have started to close in. There's the new Mercedes X-Class, that's an interesting option. And of course the Ford Ranger Raptor if you want to spend lots of money and have ultimate off-road capability. But if you want the balanced vehicle in this segment, one that's really good to drive on-road, still has a really nice interior and is actually pretty good off-road as well, the Volkswagen Amarok remains a really solid choice. And of course, it's still got the best engine in the segment. If you like this video, please go down below, like it on YouTube, leave a comment, your choice, whether it's about the Amarok or about my jeans and Timberlands, I don't actually mind. And of course, subscribe to Chasing Cars for our weekly in-depth Australian car reviews.